Alright, before I get all negative on Path of Exile, again, let me tell you how good Path of Exile 2 is. From the start, Act 1 comes out swinging with some of the best gaming to ever be had. I genuinely think everyone and their mom, at least my mom, will get their $30 worth of fun just from playing Act 2 twice. I did every single side objective in Act 1, and then I was a little upset when it was all over. The vibes were on point, the bosses were on point, the abilities just felt amazing to use. Everything was just awesome. And they even added, well, they call it a crossbow, but really it's just a gun. But then you leave Act 1, and it slowly becomes clear that early access truly does mean early access. This isn't an early release. Act 2 is good, but it's missing a lot of the side objectives that made Act 1 feel so lively. And the maps start to feel really big. Like a lot bigger than the Act 1 maps, but that's not necessarily a problem because Act 2 is still a lot of fun. Then you get to Act 3, and let me say first, Act 3 will probably be great when full release comes out, but as it is now, it's definitely unfinished. You know, early access. The maps are huge in Act 3, and they're definitely larger than they're supposed to be. But the bosses are still on point, and when the game fully comes out, I'm sure it'll be great. But for now, that's okay, because now, once you've done Act 1 through 3, you're on to Endgame, you're on to maps. Except you gotta go do 1 through 3 again. You gotta do it on Cruel mode, which is actually easier than you do it the first time, because now you have an actual build that can do stuff, and you have gear, and you have currency so you can upgrade that gear. So, it's not Cruel, it's actually easy mode. You just go through 1 to 3 again. But once you're done with that, you finally get to start the end game. And the end game, that's where Path of Exile actually starts. Once you get to endgame, everything changes, like a lot. Suddenly I'm playing on like hardcore mode, where if I die once in a map, it's over, that's done with the map. I don't want this. This sucks. And let me tell you why it sucks. When you die in a map, you are punished 4 different ways. First, you lose the Waystone. That's not always a big deal, but sometimes it is a really big deal. Secondly, you lose all progress on the map, and you lose any league mechanics on the map. That just sucks. Thirdly, you have to then waste another Waystone on an empty node to continue to make progress on the Atlas. That just feels like a waste of time. And the fourth way is you lose 10% experience, but compared to the other 3, that one's not really a big deal. So with all this risk, you would think there's gigantic rewards, right? Well, of course not. Why would there be any rewards? I've done whole tier 15 maps and not seen a single Exalted Orb or another tier 15 map. Why is that possible? I can do tier 15 maps, I just can't find any. Okay, so maybe you're thinking, maps are super punishing, rewards kinda suck, but what makes it balance is like dying's really hard, right? Well, no, dying is actually really, really easy. You will be one-shot by all kinds of random mechanics, unfair mechanics, broken hitboxes, and things you just have no chance to react to unless you already know it ahead of time. Look at this clip. I know these skeletons have like a 7-mile range with this fall attack. So my only option is to roll towards them, because if I roll away from them, I'm just gonna get hit. So, look at this. It's a totally calculated MLG gamer moment right here. I kill the left one, and I roll towards the other skeleton. And no part of me ever touched any part of them. But somehow I get killed. What's happening? What? Explain that. Explain that. I don't understand. Look at this one during a ritual. The game put the altar in a tiny space. The encounter then makes it smaller. Then the devs laugh at me as they spawn a tornado that follows me around. To cap it off, you know what they do? They flood the screen with mobs that body block me and push me around, so I literally don't have any way to avoid the tornado. And then this happens. Excuse me, what? I mean, even if you want to argue that's just a skill issue. No. This is my first time doing Ritual. How was I supposed to know that this jumping dude is gonna hit me for all of my health? How was I supposed to know what this red orb does? And even if I do know what it doesn't communicate the area of effect. So how was I supposed to know that off in this corner a mile away from the red orb, I wasn't safe? And even if I did know I wasn't safe, how are you gonna argue that this is fair and engaging? It's something that someone would want to do. Why would you put yourself through this? The rewards have got to be insane, right? Right? That's the only way to torture yourself like this. Correct? No. Absolutely not. This is a tier 13 map right here. This is a tier 13 map. This is a ritual I was doing. You see that last hidden slot? That's one unit, whatever you call it, one space. Maybe it's a divine orb. I can get me some walking boots. You know what it is? You want to know what it is? You don't want to know what it is. It's a tier 1 map. It's a tier 1. How is that possible? I'm at a tier 13. Why is it even in the loot table? Excuse me. What? Okay, maybe Ritual just isn't good right now. Maybe it just sucks. Let's try bosses. Okay, let's not try bosses. In all seriousness, bosses, outside of a couple that are bugged that you should never fight, are actually in a pretty good state. The only problem with them is that we have 1 life per map, and for some reason, the bosses all have one-shot mechanics. And I don't mean like big, really well choreographed attacks that are easy to dodge. I just mean like they have really fast, regular attacks that will just come up and whack you for all your health. Like that's not fun, especially when you only have 1 attempt at them. Stop that. Stop one-shotting people if you're going to give them 1 life. You can't have both. You literally cannot have both. It makes for a terrible playing experience. So, do bosses at least have good loot? Of course not. Why would you think that? Here's the footage of my first tier 15 kill. It dropped 1 Regal Shard. 1 singular Regal Shard. 2 if you count the rare item it dropped. Why is the loot so garbage, man? I've seen better loot in games that don't even have loot. I've seen better loot in my backyard. What do you mean? What is this? Out of all my deaths, I think 3 of them were my fault, like entirely my fault. One of them, I guess you could say it was a skill issue. I was fighting a boss and I got 1 shot. I forgot the 1-shot mechanic. Sure, I should have remembered from Act 1, but it's just kind of dumb. It has a 1-shot mechanic. The other 2, I went too hard in the paint, and I got surrounded and I died. Those 2 were entirely my fault. I'm at peace with them. But every other death, it feels like that's punishing me for daring to play the game. My first thought on how to fix this is simply remove 1 life. It sucks, it doesn't really work, not a lot of people like it, and the overall outcome that you're getting from it, making death feel relevant, doesn't need to be done so brutally. This will not only change the feel of endgame, it'll fundamentally change endgame. Because as it is right now, I'm not allowed to experiment or push my build or even challenge myself. I'm not allowed to, because if I fail doing so, I am punished 4 different ways. That's ridiculous. So now I'm forced to play in a way where I'm playing it safe all the time, and if I wanted to do that, I would have clicked hardcore at the character creation screen. They should have known better. Every system in your game should avoid punishing the player if possible. Instead, you want to reward the player for avoiding the outcome you wanted to punish. This is basic game design. Blizzard figured this out in like 2003 when they were developing World of Warcraft. Blizzard wanted to give players a negative 25% experience penalty for playing too long. And the players didn't like that because of course they didn't. Instead of punishing players for not going outside and touching grass, they decided to reward players for going outside and touching grass. It's simple framing. It doesn't matter if the math's the same, because the game is not the maths or the mechanics or the vibes or the story. The game is the experience that happens inside the mind of the player. Just how like Blizzard changed the framing, grinding your games should also just change the framing. Instead of punishing players for dying, reward players for not dying. Instead of 1 life, give the player like 3. Maybe 6 total defense was just too much, right? So give them 3 lives. Seems like a pretty good middle ground. And then instead of punishing them for dying, reward them for not dying. Say when you kill the last rare on the map, you get extra loot rewards for how many portals are left. Or you give like a base rarity increase during the map, and that lowers every time you die. I mean, sure, at some level it's gonna feel like a punishment because you really can't get away from dying feeling bad. But it'll be a lot better than dying and losing your map, your time, your waystone, your will to live, your everything. Not only will it change like this feel better for the player, it'll actually fundamentally change the way people play the game, allowing them to take risks and experiment. And that's the core of Path of Exile. They probably won't use this exact solution, but removing one life and changing the framing of it will do wonders to fix the feel of endgame. Some of these issues like balancing, loot drops, bugged bosses, the slow Act 3, I am certain will be fixed before we hit full release. Grinding Gear Games has done phenomenal work on Path of Exile 1, and the whole community has their full faith in them. What we don't have faith in is one life. It doesn't work. No one likes it. Please stop. I don't see any world, from a development standpoint, from a design standpoint, I don't see any world in which it does work and it will be sustainable for the long term. You want to make death meaningful? Do that. But don't punish people just for dying once in a game where one-shots are common. I actually do have better loot in my backyard. I found like 4 turtle shells, like big ones. I don't know what happened after I moved over here.
Poor Bucky, he's unlucky. His only friend is a ducky. Poor Bucky, he's unlucky. Only friend is a ducky. That was actually good.